Hello and welcome to Breaking Culture Live. I'm your host, Sean Johnson Andrews. I'm the past president of the Cultural Studies Association. Thanks for joining us for this experiment in scholarly communication. I'm really pleased to be welcoming Marina Levina to speak with us about the ways scholars and activists can address authoritarianism. Dr. Levina is a professor of communication in the Department of Communication and Film at University of Memphis. Dr. Levina is a nationally and internationally recognized scholar of critical cultural studies, media studies, and critical rhetoric. Her research is focused on critical refugee studies, anti-authoritarian activism and writing, Ukraine and post-Soviet decolonial studies, and horror and monstrosity studies. She's an expert in the critical studies of pandemics and disease and has published extensively on COVID-19. She's also published in journals such as Communication and Critical Cultural Studies, Critical Studies in Media Communication, Television and New Media, Surveillance in Society, and Review of Communication. She is the recipient of numerous national awards, including the National Communication Association's Robert J. Kibler Memorial Award, and she is currently the editor of Communication and Critical Cultural Studies, the chair of the Critical and Cultural Studies Division of the National Communication Association, and the co-chair of the Rhetoric Society of America's 2026 conference. She serves on multiple editorial boards, including the Advisory Board for Surveillance in Society. Today, Dr. Levina is joining us to speak about her work as co-founder of the Anti-Authoritarian Resource Network, or TAARN, developing the Addressing Authoritarianism Resource Library of the National Communication Association, and publishing work on this theme as the editor of Communication and Critical Cultural Studies. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Levina.
Thank you so much, Sean. That's quite an introduction.
You have quite a biography.
I know, it's a whole biography. Just to clarify, I'm now immediate past chair of the division.
Okay.
It rotates every year. It's hard to keep track. So we have a lovely other person who is a chair of the division. But yes.
So you're not chair of the division, but you are editor of the Critical and Cultural Studies Journal, or Communication and Critical Cultural Studies Journal at the moment.
Yes.
And in your editorial introducing your vision there, you say you're, quote, humbled by the cosmic forces that have led you to the stewardship of the journal. And as we just heard, you have a really extensive scholarly and academic profile looking at some of these themes, but you also have a very personal experience with authoritarianism. So I wonder if we could open by sharing some of that experience of your childhood, if you don't mind.
Sure, let's just start with childhood trauma. It's always fun.
That's where everything starts. It's where it all starts.
That is where everything starts. I'm 50-some years old, and I'm still here talking about childhood trauma. It just never ends, does it? I grew up in Ukraine, but I grew up specifically in the Soviet Union. So I grew up in the Soviet Union, and we left Soviet Union as refugees, as Jewish refugees, in 1989. In May of 1989. We then spent 6 months in refugee settlements in Austria and then in Italy, waiting for the United States government to give us permission to come in, which they refused to do for a while because my grandfather used to be a member of the Communist Party. So so I have grown up in authoritarian regime. I grew up in an authoritarian regime that was despotic and broken, and then attempted at self-correcting courses, and then failed at correcting courses. And when we left, we, much as the rest of the world, did not expect for the Soviet Union to fall apart when it did. But we left in 1989. So I grew up in authoritarianism, and I grew up in it through the most formative time in my life.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's not great, but it's good that you are here with us today. It gives you a sort of background, an insight into what we're facing, and I think your editorial does a lot to kind of bring that insight together. One of the things that we kind of talked about a little bit before is right at the opening. You say much has been argued about whether the current geopolitical moment represents a turn toward fascism. To be truthful, we do not yet know this answer, and I caution against an ahistorical temptation to call everything fascist so that we do not lose track of the particularities of fascist governments. This is a question I've been pondering myself. At the opening plenary of this year's Cultural Studies Association conference, we spoke with the Polish feminist Eva Majewski and the authors of the Black anti-fascist tradition, Janelle Hope and Bill Mullen, and they seem to have this very broad definition of fascism that would actually include and kind of put the origins of fascism in the context of European colonization and slavery, and then bring it all the way to the present. But I'm wondering now, after that was in 2025, when you penned this editorial, are we now in a fascist moment? And either way, what's at stake in using that term to describe it?
I mean, okay, I have a big answer for this question.
Perfect.
Everything,
big answers are great.
I would still caution us. And I wrote this again. This editorial was written by me. It got published in March of 2025. But the way that publication industry works, right? This was submitted early February. So I was writing this editorial for the most of January and some part of February. And at that point, I don't know if you remember that moment in academic history, people were just going kind of, ah! That was just a general reaction. And what I was trying to do at the time is to give some direction to the, to give some venue to this, because unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which way to even go there, because of my history, because of and also because of being Ukrainian and having to watch an authoritarian state trying to bomb my country for the last, how many years has it been? Four? 5?
Yeah. I think 4.
Going on 5, right? Going on 5 years, right? We don't like talking about this anymore. It confuses us here in the United States of America. We don't know how to talk about things like that. So, and we barely did back then either. So the idea there is that this is something I have dealt with prior to this. And even in 2016, when Trump was elected, first time, I did a whole special issue on cruelty in the age of Trump. And it was really, and I'm getting to this point, and it was very much Trump who, in some ways, changed the entirety of the trajectory of my career because of my lived experiences, like for how many decades now, not just since 2025. I have been sort of thinking and struggling with these questions. Fascism is something incredibly particular. It is a particular thing that exercised in a particular historical context by particular regimes. And I don't know what fascism is precisely here in the United States. I can see the nods towards authoritarianism. I can see the nods towards fascism. They exist everywhere. Fascism is something that exists in all of us. Authoritarianism is something that exists in all of us. The desire to be morally certain or right, the desire to know that there are clear bad guys and good guys, the desire of exercising power with a sense of clarity that says that just because I am the one that's exercising power, that power cannot be corrupt.
Sure.
All of those are affects of fascism. So in that way, I think fascism is, in some ways, and authoritarianism combined are part of the water we drink. It's part of the air we breathe. I am very much a Foucaultian. I do not believe in the antis things, right? Power circulates, power shapes, power moves through the bodies and through the communities and through the body of the individuals and the nation states and everything else in ways that we have to be mindful of. But to say that we are living in a fascist moment, sure, we've always lived in a fascist moment. And I mean that across. And who are we in that sentence too? Like, who are we in that sentence? Who are we who are living through the fascist moment? People have lived through worse things than this. And they will live, and they're currently living through worse things than you and
Sure.
I are living through.
Yeah.
And they will continue living through those worse things. And on global level, fascism, yes, it is connected to Eurocentric slavery, right? But it is also connected to the imperial colonialism of Russia that no one talks about in American academia because it doesn't really serve their vision of what colonial state looks like.
Yeah.
You know, Russia has done more to colonize the world, even though it's a land-bound nation, that outside of Britain, probably any other place other than Britain, right? We just don't look at those places as colonial because we've bought into the fiction in some ways of the Soviet Union that these were republics. These were not republics. These were countries that were colonized and forcefully joined together by the mighty Russia, who is currently attacking people in Ukraine, who are currently bombing people, attacking people in Georgia, who is currently inflicting soft power all over the world. We have China, where I just visited, right, who is also a deeply, profoundly 1,000-year-old imperial and authoritarian power. We have colonial power of Japan. We have everything that's happening in India right now with Modi,
Sure.
where they're, essentially you can see Trump agenda being borrowed from Southeast Asia. And what I would say is that my worry is that when we say we live in a fascist moment, two things happen. By we assume Americans,
Sure. Yeah.
right? And Americans in a very particular state, not Americans in terms of North America and South America. Okay, South America and fascism and authoritarianism, right? Mexico and South authoritarianism, fascism, right? We live in a world that's always been fascist, that has always been authoritarian, that has never stopped being fascist or authoritarian. Where these fascism and authoritarians ebbed and flowed and took different steps, and there's moments of opening and moments of closure. But when we say we live in a fascist moment, to me it means two things. We mean here in the United States. And second of all, we mean that we are somehow special, that this fashion thing is now happening to us, and woe is us, and how terrible is it for us. And it is terrible for us. It's awful for us. It's horrible for us. But it is also, I can sit here with you and have this conversation.
Sure. And we're not worried about somebody breaking down the door or taking us
Or
away.
putting this online. And I am not worried about my job. Losing my job, right? I can say right now Trump sucks and Trump is a fascist ass, and you can publish that, and very little will happen to me as a result of this.
Sure.
And we need to be, in our understanding of fascism, in the ways that we use fascism, mindful that we do not center our suffering as if it is somehow exceptional.
Right.
Because while it is important, it is also not exceptional, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, that's a great salvo. In the same editorial, you spend a lot of time looking at Foucault's introduction to Deleuze and Guattari's Anti-Oedipus, and I was struck by this because one of our guests last week brought up not only in the introduction but this particular point you talk about where Foucault speaks and says, fascism is in us all, in our heads and in our everyday behavior, the fascism that causes us to love power, to desire the very thing that dominates and exploits, end quote. And this is something like what Jack Bradich calls microfascism, which he says is generated in the culture. And so this would seem to give critical cultural studies a really important role in something like, if not the anti-fascist, then the micro-anti-fascist struggle at this moment.
Yeah, and Jack is a friend. We went to PhD program together. We actually have the same dissertation advisor.
Oh, wow, okay. Again,
Academia
small
is this
world.
big. Academia is this big. Anyways, and I actually, and it's true, right? I mean, I actually very much, one of the things reason why I drew on Foucault so much is because I think we've kind of, in critical cultural studies, we've forgotten the lessons of Foucault. And the lessons of Foucault is, again, that power is a micro entity. It's not just macro entity, it's a micro entity as well. And one of the things that I find it exceptionally difficult to do in my own life, and some things that requires a lot of self-reflection and a lot of pause and a lot of things, right? I am currently, how do we exercise power without falling in love with power?
Mm.
How do we exercise power while practicing detachment from the very things that gives us a feeling of control? How do we practice power without believing in our own mythology, believing that we are good guys?
Yeah.
So many revolutions end up just a slide to authoritarianism. Russian Revolution, French Revolution, Chinese Revolution, they end up just a fast slide into authoritarians because people take over and they say, I know what the correct world is, and I am going to make people live that correct world. And in academia, at least, and this is an academic podcast, right? We have a tendency towards that as well. We believe in the hype of our own ideas. We believe in the hype of our own writing. We believe in this hype, right? And we believe that we know the answer somehow, as that if only we can force everyone to think in this way, the world will be a better place.
Yeah.
And I do want to warn against that idea that these things that function within us, this love of power, this desire to make things better, right, has to be coupled with a whole lot of detachment. Practice consistent utter detachment, otherwise they become the tools of fascism and authoritarianism themselves.
Well, and dealing with the opposites, or dealing with the sort of multiplicity of possible answers there, and allowing for the real diversity in terms of outlooks,
I mean,
which is something you talk about.
This become a very contentious issue in academia, right? Because the conservatives have weaponized this idea of idea diversities, right? To shut down departments, to question the curriculums, to do all of these things, right? And so this idea that somehow other ideas don't have place in academia have become weaponized against academia. And I don't think that's correct. At the same time, I also think that the reason why this lands so well is because in some way it has a point. And unless we pause as academics and really examine that point and direct that criticism inside of us, and when I teach seminars in critical cultural studies, I always say the same thing to my students. I'm like, to do critical cultural studies, to really do critical cultural studies, you have to kill your darlings. You have to take the things that's closest and nearest and dearest to your heart, and you need to murder it. And then you can do critical.
We're talking about ideas here.
Ideas, yes, obviously, not cats.
Okay.
Not cats. I'm sorry. I'm an Eastern European. I tend to sound intense.
No.
Yeah,
Just to be specific,
we have to take
right?
these attachments. We have to take attachments to ideas. We have to take attachments to emotional, intellectual attachments to ideas, to some ways of being, or some things that are correct or incorrect, and we have to criticize them. You have to kill your darlings.
You have to kill your darlings.
Yeah, you're not doing critical work unless you're killing your darlings, right? And we write a lot about the evils of Christian nationalism, right? Without really dedicating any energy in trying to understand it.
As an example, yeah. So there's another piece. I mean, and this genre of editorial often says things that I've heard many times. But I was really struck by you have so many insights here in this editorial, and one of them that I also felt was important. And I want you to say a bit more about desire and the central role that you think desire should play in our politics and scholarship, because that's one of your key points in this piece. But I was also really struck by this passage where you say, quote, institutional chaos is the point of authoritarian regimes, not only because it exhausts the opposition, but more importantly, because it eliminates any kind of desire outside of the desire to rest. And I feel this desire so often. Sometimes I sit down with my partner and we just, it's been a hard news day, and we say something like, geez, can we just have a break? And I think a lot of us feel this desire, but you go on to say that desire to rest leads us to be nostalgic for the institutions of power that we critiqued not so long ago. It makes us think of resistance as a restoration project instead of a project offering up different possibilities for the future. The desire to rest makes us nostalgic for the abhorrent things of the past, end quote. So there's a lot of things we could talk about there. But one thing that jumped out at me was the way that, like, we could think about the Democratic Party currently pushing against any kind of popular radical candidates by appealing to something like a return to that abhorrent past. So how do we contest this reactionary nostalgia, but also push for a place to rest? Because it does feel like we need to rest sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, you need to rest. I need to rest. Everyone needs to rest. I'm not going to talk about the Democratic Party. I find it incredibly boring. This is like, again, none of this is new. This is nothing new. This is like we pretend like something new is happening in Democratic Party. For duration of my time in the United States, we have been people who are Democrat and progressive have been clutching their pearls, nervous about the state of the Democratic Party. Nervous of what the Democratic Party does and what the Democratic Party doesn't do, and what kind of candidates it nominates and what kind of candidates it doesn't nominate. I have my own personal.
So you're right there at the beginning of the Clinton era and the third way DNC. That's
this has been like this is not a new anxiety, right?
No.
And I don't find personally that anxiety interesting. Like, I find my editor. I don't know who Democratic Party should be nominating to run against Trump. I don't know who Democratic Party should be nominating to run in these midterm elections. I honestly have two minds about it, and I don't feel like I know enough about this to actually even wager this.
I think part of what I'm saying is that's part of how it has managed to survive so long, is because it doesn't really do anything other than kind of say, well, isn't that other side horrible and makes you feel anxious all the time? You can just kind of sit back and relax, and we'll let the corporations take over and have this sort of like fascism light. So that I think it's more of a political reflex that we see over and over in history. This sort of, well, maybe it's not as bad as them, but maybe we'll kind of give you a break.
Okay, but also, Sean, corporations have taken over. And not even in the United States, but globally speaking.
Yeah.
We are not living in the world outside of a corporation, nor will we ever live the world outside of a corporation ever again. And we need to understand that, and we need to form acts of critique and opening up of spaces within the, quite honestly, global realities that we live in, as opposed to hoping that we can somehow politically push away from something that's not just happening in the United States. This is not a United States thing, right?
Sure.
Like, again, like globally speaking, like that ship has sailed about like 20, 30 years ago. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm a bearer of bad news here.
No, not at all. No, I definitely. Although it's, I think that it's which political parties are willing to basically put a what is that? What is the lipstick on a pig kind of situation, right? They sort of say, well, we have to do it this way. This is the only way that it can be done. But this does recall one of the things you say in the piece, which I hear a lot about critical cultural studies not paying attention to the economy and understanding what the economic means. Is this a dimension of that? Would you say?
I think that economy. We've written a lot about capitalism.
Sure.
We write very little about materiality of class. We love using word like neoliberalism. We like using word as like, what is it, late stage capitalism. We like, what is a new word for capitalism currently?
Fascism.
Fascism. Anyways, we like writing about capitalism.
Yeah.
We don't like writing about material realities of class, because material realities of class are such that they oftentimes push back and complicate the very critique of capitalism. Capitalism and class, I think, are very two different objects of analysis. Class exists on individual level. Class has to do with the ability to buy eggs, right? And not just to buy eggs, but the ability to not worry about whether or not you will be able to buy eggs next week.
Well, and the labor relations that you have to engage in, the work that you have to do in order to buy those eggs, and how many more hours you'll have to work to buy the eggs, and what you'll have to
And
put
all
up
the
with in the
calculations,
workplace.
yes, and the uncertainties that goes inside of there.
Yeah.
And when we say that we don't talk about enough economy, I mean, we talk a lot about economy. But if you're going to really think about how you're going to engage in a non-fascist theorizations, and again, I don't use the word anti-fascist. I'm not an anti-person. I'm non-person, but I'm not an anti-person. I don't know how to be anti-things. To me, anti is a very, very clear and specific ideology, and I try not to do. So how to engage in non-fascist things, right? And to engage with non-fascist way of thinking is to engage with class as a lived material existence, with people whose politics you might actually find completely and totally abhorrent.
Mm.
Very oftentimes, right? And it
Yeah.
means to look at them and stare at them and to acknowledge in some ways their humanity. And I do not believe that that theoretical work can move us past fascism or past authoritarianism unless we are willing to do the very radical work, and I talk about this in the editorial, that work that Levinas, Emmanuel Levinas, says to us, that we have to face the other. We have to face the other, and we have to believe that other people's humanity is not representational. It's beyond representation, it's beyond signification, and it's beyond empathy. Other people's humanity is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
It is nothing that needs to be proved. It's nothing that needs to be earned. And that's an easy thing to say when you talk about people with whom you politically agree with.
Mm-hmm.
It is extraordinarily difficult thing to do when they're politics of others.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of notion that you're giving people the recognition of their humanity, and that's something that you as the sort of viewer are I guess giving that to them, or it's something you cast on them rather than it just existing before that encounter.
Yeah, you don't get to give humanity. I tell this to my students all the time. I'm like, your humanity is not mine to recognize. It is not mine to give. It is not yours to represent. It's not to represent. I don't need to be empathetic or understanding of someone's experience for that experience to have full validity.
Yeah.
And that's to me is radical humanism. This idea that others just deserve, not deserve, but just have humanity. And that is incredibly difficult to do. This requires a constant introspection. It requires a constant pushing yourself outside of comfort zone. It requires to look at someone whose political views you completely and totally abhor and remind yourself that they are human.
Well,
And
and you have to
while they're
overturn all of those kind of political narratives that are based solely on the idea that there's an other that is unsafe for you, or that you should fear, that they're your enemy, and that's the way that all the politics right now feed on that division.
Exactly. And it's especially difficult to do when they themselves deny humanities of others.
Yeah,
It is
that's
incredibly difficult thing to do is to look at Stephen Miller, whom I abhor on so many levels, right? And still think of him as a human being.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I can't get there myself, right? It's not, I'm not a saint. I can't get there myself. But I would argue that that is the only path forward. And that the difficulty of that path and the failures of that path and the impossibilities of that path is inherent in that path, right? But just because it's difficult and impossible and completely feels difficult and impossible does not make it not a correct thing, or at least a thing that allows me to sleep at night.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, so there was one other part of this editorial I want to just touch on,
Please.
which is the question of safety. Um, because one of the things that you say is that critical cultural studies cannot and should not fetishize safety in its politics, pedagogy, or research. Politics and resistance are not safe. We cannot ask them to be so. The prioritization of safety is the promise of totalitarian and authoritarian regimes. We must be willing to be unsafe if we're able to challenge thought that tries to stabilize what is meant to be unstable. And this, to me, is sort of analogous to a point you draw from Foucault's introduction to one of his I forget, they're like some points that he has on like how to be. I guess it's not anti-fascist, but basically what his program for how to kind of move forward. And he says that we shouldn't push for a return to, quote, the politics of the individual, which he says is the product of power. Um, and so I'm curious about this question of safety. I think that there's certainly people now who are more safe than others. Um, and it would seem like part of what we want is for more people to be safe, to be entered into that, you know, the area of safety. But I'm not sure if that is, if you would agree. And I also feel like I'm also curious, sort of like on another level, if there's a hegemonic project here, if the kind of anti-authoritarian movement is in any way hoping to take power, right? Is that an aspiration, or does that itself kind of undermine the anti-authoritarian project? Um,
These are big questions. So I realize I also never answered the question of rest. So I will fold this back into safety, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
When I was starting to do this work in January of 2025, there was a lot of conversation in academia, which I think somewhat subsided, but not fully, about the risks of this work, right? About the risks of this work. Like, how risky is it to do this work? How risky is it to have this editorial published? How risky is it, like, to right after that editorial, we organized a public program for NCA. Right before, I kind of went really hard almost immediately because I was like, okay, we cannot wait. We cannot wait. What's coming is really bad. What's coming is really bad. We cannot wait. We cannot wait. And I had a whole lot of conversations with my partner, who is not an academic, about these questions. Like, because I was like, okay, I can take a risk on my own behalf, but I have a kid, I have a family. I don't want to take these risks on their behalf without their consent. And I remember my partner telling me, he's like, but there is nothing else you can do. You guys are intellectuals. You have to fight this fight. He's like, if you guys don't fight this fight, he's like, we're all fucked. And I'm like, I actually really agree with you. He's like, I'm just an engineer. What can I do? But you can actually do things. You should do this. He's like, we'll deal with the consequences, but that's what intellectual life is.
Yeah.
And I have spent the last year and almost 2 years of being of some sort of people come to me and they're well-meaning people, they're lovely people, this is not the issue, but they're scared. And they want to talk to me about being scared. And they want me to tell them that it's okay to be scared, that it's okay not to do something because it's a scary thing to do. And I don't feel like I am in a position to be the priest. I'm not a priest, right? I don't provide absolutions, right? And risk is a completely personal thing that we that we know of. But I think over time, and in the past, like it's been a year and a half since that editorial,
Yeah.
I think we have shown what I said to be kind of true, right? There is no safety to be found. There is nothing that's actually safe
Right.
about this work, right? It can't be safe. Intellectual endeavors are not safe. They're not supposed to be safe. We cannot possibly want them to be safe. If we went into academia, and especially into critical fields of academia,
Right.
wanting to be safe, well, I am sorry, we're talking about really dangerous topics. We are
Yeah.
talking about powers. That's always going to be dangerous. It's more dangerous now than it was last year, a year, 2 years before. And in 2 years, it will be safer. And in another 2 years, it will be more dangerous. But the idea that we are somehow, by the virtue of our existence in academia, deserve security and safety, I think is a thing that enables inaction. And again, not everyone is safe in the same way. Not everyone has any risks,
Mhm.
like the same risks. I'm in a relatively secure position in my workplace, even though I work in a red state at University of Memphis. It's been fine.
Sure.
Last fall, I taught a graduate seminar on anti-totalitarianism and anti-totalitarianism and authoritarianism. I advertised it across campus just to make a point. But people ask me this question constantly: how do I remain safe? And I don't know the answer to this question,
Right.
because I think that fundamentally, like, people are not safe. Even within academia, people are not safe. People whom I know, whom I love, whom I'm dearly attached to, are not currently safe. And not safe, not in terms of loss of job or income, but not safe that my visa, like my immigration status, something is going to happen to, and I'm going to be sent back to a country where I'm going to be killed, right?
Yeah.
On the spot, right? Which is a different level of non-security,
It's not.
right?
It's not. It's not just being shamed on social media.
It's
Or
not just being shamed on social media. It's not just like these things that are, let's just face it, maybe are terrible, but also are sort of inconveniences
yeah.
more than real dangers.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I have friends right now. I am right now working with international graduate students who have been traumatized within an inch of their life by academia, who overcomplied with confusing directives by Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
No.
into which we are all who are in academia completely and totally complicit with. I
Yeah.
have watched so many people cry to me over the last year and a half, Sean. So many people in tears because of our own complicity, because of what everything that we have been afraid to do or didn't do correctly, or the fact that we were afraid to advocate, or the fact that we were afraid to say something, or the fact that we were afraid to even acknowledge the harms that we ourselves are causing.
Right. In academia, in
In
those
academia,
institutions. Yeah.
and I refuse to separate academia from the real world, because we are real people. This is a real world. We are not outside of the real world. We are human beings and we are in the real world. So before we start talking about, and I said this at Rhetoric Society of America during our super session, I'm like, when we start talking about solidarity with all these other countries, that's great and wonderful, on all these other politics, I think we should start talking about solidarity within things we can actually control here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how we have treated international graduate students over the past year.
Yeah.
Will be one of the most shameful moments in academic history, because we did this. We
Yeah.
ourselves did this. We could have constructed job calls that were more empathetic. We could have not advertised positions in transnational media studies and then buried the leads that we didn't do visas at the end of the application. We could have done so many things, and we did them, and we did them across the university. Cal State was one of the worst perpetrators of that.
Yeah.
And their
No.
entire
It's definitely been horrible, and then on top of that, all this sort of like up complying in advance with all sorts of directives.
Over
So, no,
complying indirect, not advocating, not posing. We managed to hire international person. And one of the, like last year, we managed to hire them. In 2025, we completed the hire. And there was a couple of moments when the visa things were kind of raising their heads. And I remember essentially telling, I'm like, look, if we are not doing this, we are going to not do this by the vote of the faculty. We are going to sit in a room and we are going to look each other in the eye and we are going to make this vote that we're deciding to prioritize our own travel funding over, over this hire. I'm like, this is not going to be done behind closed doors. I want people to look me in the eye when they do this.
Nice.
And then it happened, right? Because again, you can force these things. You can force these votes to be public. You can force these decisions to be done in faculty meetings. You can force the difficult things to be done in open as opposed to be done behind closed doors when they are more likely to hurt people. So, we academia, we talk a big game about resistance and solidarity and politics. And at the same time, we still treat our own jobs and our own job security and our own investments in our own safety as more important than anything else.
Yeah, it's the underside of the tenured mentality, right? It's you really shouldn't be afraid. The tenure is there.
And I mean, tenure can be taken away, and it will be taken, and it could be taken away, right?
I feel that.
You know that, right? It can be taken away, and you don't even need to do anything for it to be taken away.
University, you might as well do something.
You might as well do something, right? If you're gonna, but also, honest to God, we also need to think of ourselves. One of the things that I did when I was like doing, I'm like, okay, fine, I get fined. What do I do? How do I, what is the next step? And then I'm like, okay, I have a good editorial experience. I can probably find a job with Taylor and Friends as I've been working with them. I can find a job in editorial world. And once I made that decision, once I realized I have this level of skills that would allow me to find a job elsewhere, I calmed down significantly. I was just sort of like, we will find, you can find jobs. I'm not going to be expedited to a place where I'm going to be murdered. So.
Yeah. Well, so I want to make sure we talk about these different resources you've put together. So first, there is this Anti-Authoritarian Resource Network for the NCA that I think you were just talking about this, but also the Anti-Authoritarian Resource Network as a sort of standalone organization. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about how these projects got started, how they work, and what you're doing there.
So one of the things that authoritarianism tries to do is tries to isolate and take away meaning. That is fundamentally how it functions at its core, right? It isolates and it removes meaning. I tried introducing projects that would be useful to people in academia, but also would create communities where people can come together, meet others, and work together and feel like they're doing something. So I started, I thought we needed a resource library, addressing authoritarianism resource library. So a resource library that collects scholarship across different subfields of communication and offers them so then people can take these resources and think through authoritarianism critically and write about authoritarianism and theorize and also take those resources in the classroom, authoritarianism and fascism. And so last summer, I have amassed a group of, there was like 20 of us that was like, oh my God, how did it all come together? Friends of a friend, posts on Facebook, social media. It was like a team of 20 people that came together. And last summer, we worked from like May till July organizing these resources. I'm sure, can you link it in your,
I will definitely put it in the show notes. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, please
we
check
can
it out.
We can put all of these. We can put the resource library, which is really extensive, on the NCA website, and then also definitely to the TAARN website as well.
So and we sat there and for hours and hours and hours of volunteer labor. I still remember that July. It was the most exhausting July of my life, summer of my life. And we put together these resources. And what it did, it served two functions. First of all, three functions. I wanted it to serve three functions. First of all, I wanted it to demonstrate bravery. The resource library, people who have participated in it, our names are there, they're listed. People who have assembled it, it's listed who have assembled this name by their consent. You know, I wrote an introduction to the Authoritarian library and I put my name to it. And part of the reason I did all of this because I wanted to demonstrate bravery. Look, you can do this work and it'll be okay. Second of all, it was to provide scholarly resources to a field that needs these resources, I believe, to theorize these things. And
Here,
third of all, to get...
I'll share it. I'll share it here. So, so third, go ahead.
Yes. So this is, you can see this, if you scroll down, you can see what it looks like. It's being updated. I think we're going to remove some of these images to something else, but it has, I actually got someone who is a high school teacher who got interested in this project and was putting together secondary education resources, you know, like academic work, and it's long, and we used AI for summaries because we had no other way of doing this. It was just, this is really huge. And we are just doing, we did an update to it in December, and we are doing another update for it this summer again. Yeah. And you can see how extensive this is. So one of the points was to demonstrate bravery. Another point was to create resources where people can come and use it to like theorize things. And third of all is to give people something to do. Yeah. Like, so they're not together, right? So they feel like, okay, you feel out of control. What can you do? You know, not every act of resistance is a marching act, right? Academics, we're good at doing research. We're great at doing research. That's a good thing. We're very comfortable. You can sit in front of your computer and you can work and you can do something that will be useful to others. Like resist these acts of refusals or resistances, whatever they are, take many shapes, right? And it became it was very difficult. It was exhausting, speaking of being exhausting, of not resting. And anyways, I learned my lesson on that front. But it was also incredibly meaningful. And then afterwards, people would come and they would say, at least I have something to do. Like I did this and I feel better. And I always felt that was meaningful. I believe that change is incremental. I believe that if I myself can create a situation where 10 people have meaning now, then that thing like radiates outwards. Sure. You know, and then afterwards we started talking and we started thinking that what we need is an organization and to sort of support or give structure to some of the other work we want to do. So we formed the Anti-Authoritarian Resource Network, TAARN.org, which is, yes, that's it right here. And again, all of these are volunteer efforts. All of these are efforts by people. They are not really anything like the coming up things. All of this stuff depends on people. Like if we get more people involved, we've gotten a few more people involved who really got interested in art against dehumanization. So they're working on that. This summer, I was actually lucky enough because the organization found like it was strong enough that I actually took a sabbatical from it because I needed a break too. Sure. You know,
some rest. Need some rest.
I needed some rest. I actually made myself kind of sick last fall, and I needed a little bit of space. But also, I wanted to see if this is something that will live. This should not be based on like one person, right? The whole idea of a network is that it's decentralized. It should not be on me. It's not my thing. It's not anyone's thing, right? It's there for as long as it gives people structure. However, so we did this, and one of the works that we've been doing under this is actually trying, and this is something I've been involved with, is trying to organize international graduate students and give international graduate students a space and a voice in academia. So I'm actually currently working with a group of international graduate students on a list of best practices of how departments can best support them through these times.
That's great.
I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow to go through what they've collapsed. We are doing a special forum for our journal on international graduate students, theorizing international graduate students' experiences using the critical cultural studies framework. And, one of the people who works on it, I was texting with them when I was in Asia, and these new regulations of F1 visa came out, because they're just, anyways. And she was like, I am freaking out. I'm on group chat and I'm freaking out. We're all freaking out together. And I'm like, yes, but now you're on a group chat freaking out.
Sure.
Last year you were
That's
freaking
nice.
out alone. Now
Yeah,
you're freaking out with others. And now there is something for you to do. And we're going to publish like 16 works of 16 international people, graduate students, early career scholars. 4 of them are editors of this forum, right? And hopefully we can attract attention to something we can actually do here in academia to make people's lives easier or better. But second of all, we also give publication opportunities, setting some of own CVs up so they can be more competitive. And we're also bringing people together and giving them a project. Giving people something to do that produces meaning is essential right now.
Yeah, I think the best practices list would be great for both graduate students and like we were just talking about hires, job calls. Those seem like really important interventions. They're very concrete, but also it's kind of amazing that it hasn't been done yet.
It hasn't been done yet, and again, I haven't been part of these conversations, but from what I understand is because I was gone, I was traveling, and for like 3 weeks. And so, but, I was following these conversations, and people are just really happy to be able to sit in a group and do something and to feel like someone is seeing that they're struggling and saying, you're struggling, let's do something about it. This should be hopefully finalized in the next week, this list of best practices.
No,
So once it is, I will definitely share it with you. And if you could share it in your network.
I'll put it in the notes. I can update the notes at any point. So
yeah, but also,
if
yeah,
it's not there this week, then whenever it's there, you can check back to the video and it'll be there.
And I'm
Or
hoping
to the TAARN website.
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure
I
you'll have it
want
on there.
to have National Communication Association to post it on their website. I will also contact other like Cultural Studies Association, AAUP, other places, and try to get this out as much as possible. That's the goal. We'll see what we can do. It's always kind of a little bit banging your head against the wall.
Well, but like you said, once you have those list of best practices, it's something that other faculty members could take to their faculty meeting and say, this is the kind of thing we should be doing.
Yes.
I want you to tell me to my face we're not going to do it.
Yes.
Because this is what should be done, and we can't just pretend like we don't have agency here, or we don't have ways to get involved, or ways to be kind of agents in this moment.
Yeah, this is actually something we can do to counteract the horrible immigration policies of this regime. There is a lot of things we cannot do anything about, and my heart bleeds for all these things we cannot do.
My understanding of the resource network is also that it is something that everyday people, or people who aren't in academia, other activists who are outside of academia, can also either use or get involved with. Is that also true, that this is something that people can be?
Yes, this is completely free. Everything is available to the public. I do not care if people are academics or non-academics. I don't actually care about that. Some of the most active members in TAARN are not academics right now.
Yeah, it says something about you're setting up speakers bureaus. Is this something that
we want to? Unfortunately, it's one of these things. You can create an infrastructure for something, but the idea behind this network is always like we create an infrastructure, but if people step up and do things, we've been doing public programs, we've been doing other things. I would love to have someone who is interested in setting up more active speaker bureaus to work with us to help us do it. But again, it's also the question of human capacity as well.
Sure. Well, we'll put all the links to the resource for the NCAA and also the TAARN website in the show notes. And once you have that, we'll update it as well. But there are a lot of ways for people to get involved, and I appreciate all the work you're doing to help them to help create these ways for people to get involved.
I just want us to survive better. I
Survive.
don't want us to just survive. I want us to
Yeah.
survive better. I want at the end of the day to be part of academia that's not complicit in the very thing it's critiquing.
Well, and I think that kind of as you suggest that it has long been an issue, but I think it's more it's thrown into relief in this moment in a way that maybe it hasn't been, and so it is an opportunity to think about that in a very concrete way.
Yeah, and I also hope that academia can start, American academia can also start thinking more globally.
Yeah.
Because a lot of terms of analysis change completely when you start thinking about them globally. And not just globally in a way that's convenient, but globally in the way that's inconvenient as well.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today and share your ideas and the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was really lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Next week, I'll be speaking with my colleague Kathleen Rosano about the Trump administration's moms.gov website and the anti-authoritarian family. Um, uh, if you are joining us on YouTube, it'll be streaming again there. This episode will also be available probably tomorrow with the show notes on the Breaking Culture Live YouTube channel. So please share it with your colleagues and let us know if you have any ideas for future episodes or invitees by emailing us at breakingculturelive.gmail or at gmail.com. Thanks again for joining us. Again, I'm Sean Johnson Andrews. Please check out my Substack at breakingculture.substack.com.